Hi, and welcome. Today we're going to be working on Microsoft Word. The chapter is called Word Create Business Reports. If you're following along in the textbook, you should open that chapter in your textbook, and you should also go to Fanshawe Online, download the file wrdo2_leds, and once you have that open, we can get started. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do, the first thing I want you to do is to make sure that the Show Hide button is turned on. So you would click on the Home tab, and you'll make sure that this Show Hide is turned on. I'll turn it off and turn it back on again. So what the Show Hide does is shows you all the non-printable characters in your Word document. So it would show you page breaks, it'll show you paragraph markers, which is those backward P's that you can see there. It also shows like a little dot in between each where a space would be in your document. It's important that you have that because sometimes when we tell you to move to the top of the document or the bottom of the document, if you don't have that turned on, you might not actually be at the top. You might be within a blank paragraph. Understand that within Word, a paragraph is anytime there is a paragraph marker. So just because there's nothing in it doesn't make it not a paragraph. It can still be a paragraph even though it's blank. Okay, so we're going to be at the top of the document. Before we get into that, on the far left you'll see something called the navigation pane. If you don't see the navigation pane, click on the View tab and make sure there's a checkbox in navigation pane for that to show up on the left hand side. What the navigation pane allows you to do is quickly move through a document. So you can see if I click on these headings, it takes me directly to that part of my document. I can look at pages, so I could click on the first page, the second page, or the third page, and results is used when we do things like find, and we'll come back to that in a bit. So in the meantime, click back on headings so you can see what I have here. So click on risks of lighting of historic documents, and then just scroll up to the top of the document. Notice that when you click on that risk about lighting of documents and click on the Home tab, you can see that up here on the styles grouping that is a heading 2 cell style. What a cell style is a combination of formats that have been assigned a name. Later on we'll show you how you can actually create your own styles, but the nice thing about styles, and you should be using your styles as you work through a document, because as you saw in the navigation pane, it allows you to quickly move through a document, but it also makes sure that your headings and subheadings and so on are all consistent and look the same. So they have that consistent look and feel that is required of a professional looking document. Okay, so go to the top of your document. I'm just going to move someplace else in the document. A keyboard shortcut to move to the top of the document is the Control plus the Home key. That'll make sure you're at the top of the document. Control plus End takes you to the end of the document. So again, hit Control plus H to go to the top of the document, and we can get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in 5 blank paragraphs just by hitting the Enter key 5 times. Now what I'm doing here is I'm using those paragraphs to provide me some spacing. I just want to have the heading a little bit further down in my document. And I'm going to type, I'm going to select heading 1 style. So that means that the text that I'm entering now has the style of heading 1, and you can see that space that just showed up between that paragraph marker and the one above. That's paragraph spacing, which we'll come to later today. Type LED lights, hit enter, and a museum, exhibit, case, study. Hit enter. Oops, got a spelling mistake. I didn't get a space between the A and museum. And then type by and your name. Hit enter. And here you want to enter today's date. You could actually type in the date, but if you click on Insert, and at the far right you'll see date and time. I'm going to click there, and you'll see a number of different formats for dates. So I'm simply going to take this one here, January 11, 2019. You'll notice down here you have an option to say update automatically. If I turn that off, then it will always show as January the 11th, 2019. If I leave it turned on, then each day it will change the date to whatever the current date is. All right, so I'll leave it on because it doesn't really matter too much for this exercise. And then I want to center all of that text that I've just created. Now again, I told you at the start that paragraph formats, which are here in this group here, so bullet points, alignments, line spacing, and what have you, are a paragraph alignment applies to the whole paragraph. So you don't have to highlight the whole thing. So if I wanted to highlight or center the word LED lights, I could simply click anywhere in there and click center. On the other hand, if I want to do that same format to a number of lines at the same time, I can select the lines and apply it. But just so you understand that there are a number of different ways to select text in Microsoft Word. You can select it by click and drag, as we've just done here. I can also move my cursor out to the left margin so that my cursor changes back to an arrow pointing towards the text, and click and drag. That will select just the line. Now I'm also going to go down here into this text here. Just click anywhere in the paragraph. That's the insertion point. So if I was to start typing now, it would start typing text. If you double click on a word, it will select that word and the space following it. So then I could replace the word and what have you. If you triple click, it will select a whole paragraph. And if you control click, it will select a whole sentence. Right? So it doesn't really matter which way you do it. I'm not really a big fan of click and drag to select, because quite often you'll miss a character, or it'll miss the first character or the last character and what have you. I mostly just use the line select on the left margin, but it's completely up to you. And I'm going to center all of that text. Okay. Now notice over on my navigation pane that I now have a new heading here called LED lights. That's because I set that up as a heading 1 cell style. And the other ones are now indented because they are heading 2 cell styles. So they're a sub to the LED lights heading 1 cell style. Now what I want to do is I want to search through the document for the word L period, E period, D period. I want to see how many times that shows up in my document. I'm going to do that through here, so I'm going to put L period, E period, D period, and I'm going to click on results. And it will tell me that it found that text 13 times within my document. By the way, I could have gone over on the Home tab. In the far right, there's a find option, but basically all that will do, if the navigation pane is not open, it will open the navigation pane and put me on this search line. There's also an option for replace, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so now I've got this list of the 13 times it's found it. So if I click on the very last one, it'll take me into the document and position me on that particular placement. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to replace that L period, E period, D period with just LED. To do that, I'm going to click the arrow beside the LED search bar here, and I'm going to click on replace. That's going to bring up the find and replace dialog box. I could have also done that by Control H, which would have also brought up that dialog box. And I'm going to say replace it with LED. Now I have the option here to click on replace all. I have the option to say find next. So find and next will find, so I'm at the end of the document, so it'll start over at the top. So it'll find the first one. Normally when I do a replace, I do like to do a find next on the first one, just to make sure that the replace is replacing exactly what I thought it was going to replace. As an example, if I replaced Cam with Pat, it would replace it whenever it found Cam, but it would also replace it whenever it found Came, C-A-M-E, or camera, and so on and so forth. So sometimes you've got to be a little bit careful when you're doing a find and replace to make sure you don't get unanticipated results. But in this case it's fine, so I'm going to click on replace all. It'll come up and it'll say it found 13. Do I want to continue at the beginning? I'll say yes. It'll say all done. We made 13 replacements. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to close the dialog box. Okay, so that is skill number 1, find and replace text. Skill number 2 is insert and modify footnotes. What a footnote is a note at the bottom of your page that basically is used to, if you've got something in your text that you need clarification on, but you don't want to actually put it into the text, you can put it into a footnote. An example I would say is if you have hours of work, so we're open 9 to 5 Monday to Friday or something, you may want to put a little asterisk on that, and at the bottom you'd say summer hours, or from August, from June 1st to September the 30th or something. So it's just a further clarification on the text that you don't want to actually put right into the document. So to get to this, what we're going to do is I want you to go to the navigation pane and click on methodology. By the way, if you don't see the listing, if you still see results or pages, just click on headings so that you can use this to navigate your document. I'm going to go to methodology, and I want you to find the text that say output to the desired level, which is right here. It's the second paragraph in that group. When you're inserting a footnote, you always insert the footnote following the period, or whatever punctuation there is. If there's quotes around it or whatever, it would be following the quotes and a period, commas, or what have you. To insert a footnote, I'm simply going to go to the References tab, and we're going to look in this box called Insert Footnotes. So there's Insert Footnote, Insert Endnote, Next Footnote, and Show Notes. So next footnote would simply, if there were footnotes in the document, it would simply cycle you through the different footnotes. Endnotes are similar to a footnote, but an endnote is positioned at the end of a document or the end of a section. We're not going to spend any time in this talking about sections, but just so you understand what they are. A section is how you break a document into, think of it as small individual Word documents. So if you wanted chapters as an example, so chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and you wanted all your notes at the end of each chapter, at the end of chapter 1 you would insert a section break, and then that would break, then you would start over again in section 2, section 3, section 4. And in effect, each section has its own formatting. You can change the orientation for a section. You can have endnotes and that sort of thing. But for our purposes, we're just going to stick with footnotes. So I'm going to click on Insert a Footnote. You can see as soon as I do, it puts a little superscript 1 up beside where I had the cursor, and it opens a line at the bottom of the page, and it allows me to type text. I'm not going to go in, the textbook tells you to type in "screening is the process of installing layers of metal window screen." I'm simply going to type in the words, "This is footnote 1." All right. Okay, so now we're going to go up a little bit further. So in the cost benefit analysis section here, we're going to find the text that says LED lamp life is longer by a factor of 16.67, which is right here, the line just above the footnote actually. We're going to insert a second footnote here. So I'm going to go back, insert a footnote, and I'll type, "This is footnote 2." The whole purpose of doing this is because now we're going to go back up a little bit further, and we're going to go above where we were before. So we're going to insert a third footnote here. So in effect, I'm putting a footnote in between footnote 1 and footnote 2. And this is just to show you that when you insert a new footnote, it will resequence the footnotes so that they stay in chronological order. So I'm going to insert a footnote here, and this is footnote 3. Good note. All right. So even though it's the second footnote, it's actually the third one that I put in here, and I still have a spelling mistake. Let me fix that. Okay. And notice that one of the footnotes is moved to the next page. So if I go down here, you can see there's my third footnote right on the first line, and my footnote is now at the bottom of page 3. And that's simply because by adding that new footnote, the text had to move to the next page because there wasn't enough room, and the footnote follows along with the text. Okay, if you click on the footnote launcher here, you can see that you have where you want to have your footnotes, so bottom of the page, top of the page, or below the text, and so on. You could change the numbering, so if I wanted to have icons instead of numbers, I could have a list of icons here to show up beside my footnotes. Start at 1. So again, if you wanted, for whatever reason, you had a set of footnotes and you wanted to start a new series starting at number 1, you could do that. Numbering, continuous, and so on. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel that. Okay. Oh, and they tell you to change the sizing of the footnote to 12. I'll just do that. Just click on the Home tab, make it 12. Now, one thing to be aware of, and as well, and this is just something that kind of seems to kind of catch people every now and again. When you do a spell check, if you are in a footnote and you spell check, it will only spell check the footnote. So if you're working on a grader assignment and it says spell check the document, and you happen to be in the footnote and you click on spell check, and it comes up and says there are no mistakes, but you look up and you actually can see a spelling mistake, that's the reason. All right. So it's the same thing if I had some text highlighted in my document and clicked on spell check, it would only spell check the highlighted document, or the highlighted text. So to do a spell check, you just want to make sure you're somewhere in the document. And as well, when you start a spell check, wherever you are in the document, it'll go from that place to the bottom of the document. When it hits the bottom, it'll say, do you want to continue from the top of the document? It'll start over at the top and then back down to wherever your cursor happened to be. So just so you're aware what's happening there. Okay, so that's skill number 2. Skill number 3 is about sources. So sources is all about citations. So a footnote is used to provide further details about something in your document. A citation is to identify to your audience, whoever's reading the document, that whatever you have cited is information that you pulled from another source. So a book, website, journal, television, whatever. Okay, so it's just to show your audience that that is not your thought, that belongs to somebody else, and you're using that to either support or refute, perhaps, your position that you're trying to make with the document that you're working with. Okay, so sources again are on the References tab, and they're in this group called Citation and Bibliography. So there's an option here called Insert Citation, Manage Sources, Style. So if I click on the Style button, the style determines how your citations and your bibliography is formatted. So different styles are going to have different things that show up in the citation, or they're going to change the way the bibliography displays, or they could actually even change the information that's in the bibliography itself, like what information is captured. Normally at the college you're going to use the style APA 6th. Chicago is another one. Basically, these are all based on, Chicago has a book called the Chicago Book of Style, which determines how you should write a document and where you put paragraphs and commas and footnotes and all of that sort of stuff. And that's what all of these are. So different industries will use different styles, but for our purposes, we'll usually use APA. The textbook uses Chicago, so we'll leave it like that for right now. I want you to click on Manage Sources. And within Manage Sources, what you can see in this particular document, we have no sources in my master list, and I have one source in my current list. Yours may not look like that. It is all dependent on what you've been doing within Word. Here's the reasoning for that. When you create a citation, when you create a source for a citation, in other words, the citation is simply pointing to the position in a book. The source is, the name of the book, the author, the publishing, and the date, and all that sort of thing. When you create a source, that source goes into your master list and it goes into your current list. The current list is whatever citations are in effect for this document. And the master list, the whole point here is that when you create that source, it'll stay in your master list until you delete it. So the whole purpose here is that it's based on the premise that when you create a citation, there's a chance that you may want to use that same source again for something else, another document. If you're working for the government, or if you're working for a research firm, or if you're in HR and you're continually referring back to government documents of whatever type for legislation or what have you, there's a good chance that if you've cited that reference once, you're going to need to do it again. So what the master list allows you to do is to slowly build up a library of citations and sources. So if you are going to use it over and over again, you can leave it in the master list, and then the next time you want to reference it, you don't have to rebuild the source because it's already there. If, on the other hand, you're only ever going to use that citation once, then once you've created it, and we're going to create some in a second here, once you create that source, you can delete it from the master list and leave it on your current list. So it'll still be in effect for the document that you're on, but it won't carry forward into further documents. Alright, so that all being said, if you look on your current list, you can see that there's one citation, or one reference source here. The little check mark beside it means that particular source has been cited somewhere in the document. Okay, so we'll come back to that. So what we want to do is we want to create a new source. So I'm going to click New, and then I can determine what kind of source. Let's create a book source at the start. So in the book, I can give it an author or a corporate author. So an author would be whoever wrote the book. If it was written by, Department of Veterans Affairs, then you would simply click corporate author and put Department of Veteran Affairs or what have you. So let's just create a book with any author that you want. I want the title, so whatever you're going to call it. Oops, sorry, I selected the wrong source. I just want book. I don't want book section. There we go. Okay, so book. So this is my book. The year that the book was published, the city it was published in, and the publisher. Okay, and click OK. Notice when I do that, it shows up in my master list and in my current list. So I'm assuming that I may never need this one again. If I don't ever want to use it again, I can click on the master list one and delete it. So it's no longer in my last master list, so it won't show up again the next time I try to do a source, but it will stay for this current document. Let's create a couple more. So let's create a journal article. So it's basically just going to fill in the thing. Let's say it's a corporate author this time, and it's Department of Veteran Affairs. How do I spell veteran? That's not right, but I don't care. Okay, and the title of whatever the article is. How do you spell veterans? Oh well, I've got 3 different spellings so far, 2 different spellings. I'm not even going to try anymore. I'm going to call it, this is the journal, title or name, and the year is 2018, and the pages were 15 to 22. Alright, I'm going to click OK, and you can see again it's in both my master and my current. I'll leave it here for now, although I really don't want to, and I'll create a website. Okay, author Joe Blow, the name of the web page, benefits for hourly workers, the year 2018, the month July, the day 21st, the year accessed 2018, the month December, the day accessed 15th, and the URL www.manulife.com. Okay, and again, whatever you type in there, it doesn't matter. We don't need to keep any of this anyway. All right, and if I didn't want either of those, I could select them both out of the master list, and I could click delete. Right, so now they're not going to be carried forward, but they are still available for my current document. Once I've created my sources, I can close this. Now this is based on the premise that you are going to kind of capture all your sources and type them in at once. You do have the option when you're working in Microsoft Word, and I'll show you later on, that when you cite a particular place in your document, you can actually create the source right at that time. So instead of having to do it as 2 steps, write down your source, then cite it, you could just go to your citation, click on that, create your source, and then add your citation at that point in time. What that doesn't give you is the ability, well, it probably does. Okay, so let's just leave it like that. Okay, so that was skill number 3. So we're going on to skill number 4. We're actually going to add our citations. So I want you to navigate to the risk of lighting. So on the navigate pane, I'm going to click here to go up to the risk of lighting here, and I'm going to look for the right of all lighting harms paragraphs right here, the very first line. And again, your citation will follow any punctuation, any quotes. your citation will go right after that. And then I'm going to click on Insert Citation. So when I do, it gives me a list of all of the sources that I currently have available to me in this document. And I could also go to Add New Source. So then this is going to give me the ability here to create my source right away. What it doesn't give me the ability to do is to delete it from the master list if I don't want it any more than this document. But in this case, I'm going to say, for this one here, we're simply going to go to Joe Blow, and you can see that it creates the citation. Understand that when you insert a citation, it's actually a two-step process. You have to insert the citation, then you have to go back in and edit the citation to add the page number. And that's simply, it kind of didn't make sense to me at first, but it does when I think about it. It's this, you may cite the same document 5 or 6 times in your, cite the same source 5 or 6 times in your document. So each time you cite it, it may be a different page within your source. So rather than do it at one step, they just do it in 2. So when I click on my citation, it's going to give me an option, drop down. I can edit the citation. I could edit the source as well. I'm going to edit the citation, and I'm going to add my page number. And I'm going to click OK. Okay, and now I have a valid citation. Okay. Go to saturation and content. Well, it doesn't matter. Just find someplace else in the document. Normally your citations will be following information you have in quotes. I'm not sure where they want us to go to here, so I'm not going to worry about it. Just find a spot that you'd like to add another citation. Here's one. We'll add a citation here. All right. I'm going to click on Insert Citation. I'll go to this here. So there's my citation. I will click on it again, edit the citation, and at that point I'll put in the page number. Okay. All right, so now I've got 2 citations, plus there was already one in the document. Because remember when we looked at the sources, there was that little checkbox. If I go to my Manage Sources now, you'll see that I have checkmarks beside 3 of the 4 sources. So now what I'm going to do is I want to add my bibliography. So to add your bibliography must be on a page by itself. So you want to go to the end of your document and then add a new page. Tell Word to move to the new page automatically. To do that, I'm going to use Control-End to go to the end of the document. And now I want to add a brand new page. And what I want you to be aware of here is there's an option here called Insert Page Break. And what Page Break does is it forces you to move to the next page. If I ever see anybody who simply hits a number of returns until word wrap dumps you to the next page, I will come and I will find you and I will smack you, because the only way to advance to a new page, to force it, is to use insert a page break. You never use spacing to move to the next page, because if you use spacing to move to the next page, then if you do anything to the document to change it, it'll affect your spacing. If I change my margins, if I change my paragraph spacing, my line spacing, if I add some text, all of a sudden you end up with a great big blank page in your document because you put all these carriage returns in to jump it to the next page. So whenever you want to force to move to the next page, you use a page break. There's 2 ways to add a page break. You can do Control plus Enter, or you can go to the Insert tab, and there's an option here called Insert a Page Break. Okay, so I'm going to say Insert a Page Break. You can see, because I have paragraph markers turned on, I have Show Hide turned on, you can see there's the page break, and it dumps me down to the next page. To add a bibliography is very, very straightforward. You're simply going to click on References, and you're going to click on Bibliography. What it will do is it gives you 3 choices: bibliography, references, or works cited. We're going to use bibliography, so I'm going to click on bibliography, and immediately it adds my bibliography to my document. It is currently set up with the proper formats for a Chicago style. If I had APA 6, it would have a different format, but basically this is the way it's going to look. So you can see that you have, even though we didn't cite one of those references, all 4 of the references show up here in the bibliography. Okay. Now, one thing you should be aware of is that a bibliography is not dynamic. In other words, if I go back and I change a citation, or I delete something, or I change a source. Let's say I realize that I have the wrong publisher or the wrong author or whatever in one of my sources. I go to my managed sources and fix that. That will not show up in my bibliography, because once you create the bibliography, it's there. If I added more citations into my document, they wouldn't show in the bibliography unless I click on the title of the bibliography and say update citations in bibliography. When I do that, it will recreate the bibliography to match whatever changes were made. Okay. And notice now it's also over here in my headings. In my navigation pane, and that's because the bibliography heading here, if I click on the Home tab, you can see that that word bibliography is a heading 1 cell style, no different than LED lights up here. So it's added to my navigation pane as a level 1 heading. Okay. So skill number 5 is bulleted bullets and bulleted and numbered lists. So bulleted lists are just, and we use this in PowerPoint, of course, so everything was done in bulleted lists. Bullets are used when you have just points of information. Numbered lists are when you have points of information that are sequential. So do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. And it's completely up to you how you want to create that. So what they want you to do is go to the cost-benefit analysis section, okay, and these 3 lines we want to be a bulleted list. So to make that a bulleted list, it's as simple as going to the Home tab, and you can see on the paragraph mark I have bullets, I have numbering, and I have multi-layer, multi-level. We want to make this a bulleted list. If I click just the bulleted list, it'll just create bullets of whatever the last bullet was used. If I want to select my bullet, I can click on here and select the bullet that I want to use. I can define a new bullet. If I define a new bullet, I can use pictures, I can use shapes and what have you to define that bullet. But we're just going to click on solid bullets. Okay, and notice that when I created that bullet, it automatically indents the bullets by a certain size. Now the textbook and the grader assignment wants you to increase the indent. So remember, we talked in PowerPoint that level 1 bullets and level 2 bullets and level 3 bullets. So when you increase the indent, you're going to change it from a level 1 to a level 2, and it's going to indent it a little further. If I want to increase the indent on these, I'm simply going to click in the paragraph group on the increase indent icon to increase those indents. And we'll worry about the line spacing in a minute to bring those 3 bullets together. And we're going to go to the cost benefit analysis section, which is where we are. So we've already done that, sorry. We're going to go to recommendations. And what they want is the 4 paragraphs starting with LED lighting and ending with City Hall departments. So from here to here. So here I want a numbered list, so I'm going to click the arrow beside numbers. So here I can decide which number list that I want, which type. I can define a new number format, but again we're simply going to go with the default here. If I go back into that, I do have the ability to change the list level, and I can have a new number format, and I can set the numbering values. So if I wanted to start at a different number, I can do that. And again, I'm going to increase the indent. Okay. And they just simply say, if you select, I'm going to select this, conduct a similar, I'm going to move it up to number 2, and it's simply, when you move things around within a numbered list, it'll automatically renumber the list. Alright, skill number 6 is about paragraph indents. So I want you to go to the top of the document, so Control Home, and we're going to click in this paragraph that says in April 2014 and so on. So what we want to do is we want to set this paragraph up as a first line indent. So again, I'm taking you back to probably grade 6 or grade 7 when you were starting to write paragraphs. A first level indent means that the first word in the first line is indented and the rest of the paragraph comes out to the left margin. So in this case, I would want the words in April 2014 to be indented a certain space. That's called a first line indent. Conversely, a hanging indent is where the first line goes to the left margin and all the rest of the lines in the paragraph are hanging. If I click on my bibliography, you can see that this, Wiggins here, is a hanging indent. So the first line is at the left margin and the rest of the document is indented. All right? So again, I'm going to go back to the top of the document, Control Home. I'm going to click in the paragraph, and again, as I said before, paragraph formats, you do not have to highlight all the text. You just have to be inside the paragraph. And to be so inside this particular paragraph, I'm going to try and, if I look in my paragraph group, you can see that there's nothing in here for special indent. I'm going to have to bring up the dialog box. So I'm going to click the launcher here to bring up my paragraph dialog box. There are two tabs, line and page breaks and indent and spacing. So we want to be on indent and spacing at this time. And you can see here that I've got this option called special indent. So I'm going to click here on first line. It's going to default to a 1/2 inch, which is the default that uses, and we're going to stick with that. And I'll click OK. All right. So now that paragraph is okay. And I want to duplicate that in this next paragraph, all lighting harms and so on. I could do the same thing. I could go here, go to the paragraph launcher, bring up the paragraph, indent it. But one of the shortcuts in Microsoft Office is once you've done a format, if you hit F4, it will duplicate that format. So if I had done 5 different formats to a particular word, then I could go to another word, highlight it, click F4, and be the same as doing those all over again. It's kind of like Format Painter, which we'll come back to in a little bit of time. And I could do it on this paragraph as well, hit F4, and so on. I'm going to go to methodology, and in the first paragraph here, there is another way to increase your first line indent. If you look on the ruler, let's make sure your ruler is visible. So click on the View tab, make sure that there's a checkbox in ruler. I'm going to turn it off, turn it back on again. So I can see the ruler. So I've got the vertical ruler on the left, I've got the horizontal ruler across the top. Notice that the rulers in Word are different than the ones in PowerPoint. In PowerPoint, they started at 0 at the middle, and they went above 0, below 0, left of 0, right of 0. In Word, they simply start at 1, go down by inches across, down and inches across. All right, so and you don't have the little guides within the rulers that show you your current position. Right? They're just a basic ruler. If you take a look at the horizontal ruler across the top, you can see that you have an arrow. So, and two little triangles. So the top one is first line indent, the second one is hanging indent, and the bottom one is just indent. So is the left indent. So I can change my first line indent by simply clicking on this first line indent, click and drag, and there I've got my same first line indent. So how you do it is completely up to you. And I don't know if F4 would work here. Let's see what happens. Yep, it does. Okay. So, and just as an FYI, rather than going up, so if I wanted to, I could go home. If I wanted to bring up the launcher, I could click the launcher. I can do that as well simply by right-click, go to paragraph, and that brings up the same dialog box. Okay. So most of the time when you're trying to find, when there are things up on the ruler and you want to bring up dialog boxes, there's always an opportunity simply to right-click. So if I wanted to bring up the font dialog box, I would click here. And if I want to bring up the paragraph dialog box, I would simply click here to bring it up. Okay. So skill number 7 is modify line and paragraph spacing. So one of the important things that I always emphasize when I'm dealing in Microsoft Word is something called white space. A professional document is not just about getting your text into your document, it's also making sure that that text is properly positioned to fill up the page properly so that it's not lumped together in the top left-hand corner or stuck in the middle of the document and what have you. And you do that using 3 different ways of managing the amount of managing the printable space within a Word document. The first one are the margins. So the margins run along the outside of your document. So there's a left margin, a right margin, a top margin, and a bottom margin. So the margins are on your layout tab. They're over here, margins. And you can see that I have a number of different margins. So I've got normal, narrow, moderate, wide, mirrored margins, custom margins. This one currently is a custom margin, so I'll click on custom margins. And here you can see that the top margin is 1 inch, the bottom margin is 1 inch, left is 1 1/4, right is 1 1/4, and we'll talk about gutter and gutter position. Well, let's do it now while I've got you here. So within here, this is saying that my top margin runs across the top of my page. That's 1 inch and 1 1/4 on each side. The reason you adjust your margins is because you want to either expand or restrict the amount of space that you can type your text into. If I've got a lot of text on a page and I want it to fit on one page, I would make my margins narrower, which gives me more space within my document for text to be positioned. If on the other hand I don't have as much information on the page, I can widen my margins. By widening my margins, making them wider, I restrict the amount of space that's available on the document. Therefore, it's going to fill up the page more with less information. Okay, the top and the bottom margins, same sort of thing. If I narrow the top margin and the bottom margin, it would give me more space for more information to fit on the page. It's in the margins at the top and the bottom that your headers and footers are going to go, and we're going to come back to those in a little bit of time. Gutter, on the other hand, where you see the word gutter here, a gutter is used when you're going to take a document and let's say you're going to put it into a folder that has a spine. So you don't want to have any of your text hidden inside that spine because people wouldn't be able to read it. Now you could simply widen the left margin, but what a gutter does is gives you what is considered to be dead space there. So watch that preview picture that you can see there. As I increase the gutter position, you can see those dotted graphic that you can see on the left hand side there. And that's basically now my margins. So if I still have a 1 1/4 inch margin, but it begins at the edge of the gutter, not at the edge of the page. So that would allow me to put in a spine and still have my spacing show the way I want. I have the gutter position. It can be at the left, or in this case it could be at the left or the top. So I'm going to change that back again just to just to get rid of that again. Whoops, just delete it. Okay, and finally you've got orientation, so I can have portrait or landscape. Most of the time in a Word document it's going to be portrait, but you never know, sometimes you might have landscape. And multiple pages, so I have normal, mirrored margins, 2 pages per sheet, and book fold. So normal margins, you can see at the top it says left. My margins are top, bottom, left, right, and my gutters. I'm going to switch to mirrored margins. You're going to see it's going to change from top, bottom, to inside and outside. So that would mean, as an example, if I'm going to have a 3-hole punch within my document, I might want to have a wider margin on the inside than on the outside, so that I could have and then it would change it on each second page. So on one page, the inside margin is going to be on the right, and the next page, the inside margin is going to be on the left. Okay, and finally, you've got 2 pages per sheet, which is up, top, and bottom, and you have book fold, which is very similar to mirrored margins, quite honestly. Okay, and I'm going to go back to normal. You also have an option at the bottom called apply to whole document, or you have the option to say from this point forward. And that would be used if you want to, let's say you have a cover page, you want to have a certain set of margins on that page, and then the rest of the document you want to have a different set of margins. You could set your margins on the cover page, then at the start of the second page you could change your margins and say from this point forward I want these new margins. And you could change those periodically throughout the whole document if you wanted to. You really shouldn't be doing that because it's going to make your document look awkward, but I could see it on a cover page and text. Okay, and then you've got the tab for paper, which is just your paper size, and layout, which is basically what we've been looking at to some extent anyway. And you also have an option here called borders. So this allows you to put borders around your document. So you have colored borders, you have art borders, so you can put little cherries or pieces of pie around the outside of your document. You should do that on your cover letter. It would look really, really special. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that. You also have those options, by the way, on the Design tab. If I click on the Design tab on the far right, there's page borders, page color, And there's also watermark. A watermark allows you to put text of some sort or a picture on the back of your document. So you would usually use that if it was going to be like a draft document. You want the word draft printed across the back so somebody doesn't treat this as gospel or confidential or something to that effect. You could put that on as a watermark. Okay. All right, so line and paragraph spacing. So go to LED lights, so the first 4 paragraphs. Okay, and I'm going to have you select the first 4 lines. What I want to do is right now there's 2 types of spacing. So we've talked about margins as white space. There's 2 other types. There's line spacing, which is spacing between lines inside a paragraph. And then there's paragraph spacing, which is the amount of space above and below the paragraph. So you use paragraph spacing to make sure that your headings and what have you are slightly removed from the text above or below. Now if you take a look at the text that I've just highlighted, you can see that above the word LED lights there's this large gray area. That gray area is identified as paragraph spacing before. I have the same thing between a museum exhibit, case study, and by Cam Quinn, but in that one you can see that the gray space is below the words, so that's paragraph spacing after. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to set the spacing before to 0 and after to 12. To do that, I'm going to go back to my Home tab, and I'm going to bring up my paragraph launcher. And here I've got an option called spacing, and I'm going to set my spacing before to 0 and my spacing after to 12. So watch what happens when I hit OK. You can see that now I have no spacing before LED lights and I have 12 points after each one. I can also go into do my line spacing. So line spacing is here, and I'm going to set my line spacing to single, which doesn't really affect anything in this case. I'm going to click on my paragraph here, and if I double click you can see I have all this space after the word April, but that's not paragraph spacing, that's line spacing. The reason being is because I'm inside a paragraph. So what I want to do is I want to change my line spacing in that paragraph. To do that I'm going to go into the paragraph group, I'm going to click on line spacing, and I'm going to change that to 1.15. Okay. And then I'm going to set my paragraph spacing to after to 12. To do that I'm going to bring up the launcher and I'm going to set after to 12. And notice that the after to 12 just is after the paragraph, so it only applies on this line. It doesn't apply on these lines because those are at the end of the paragraph. This happens to be the end of the paragraph, so then I get that line paragraph spacing of 12 after that. Okay. Now there's other ways to get to your paragraph spacing. It's also available on your layout tab. So there's paragraph spacing here. And again, I can right click, go to paragraph, and find it there as well. Okay. Now I want to actually take that same paragraph spacing I just put into place in this paragraph and apply it to all the other paragraphs in my document. I could simply go and redo all my formatting, so I could go in and change this line spacing to 1.15 and spacing after to 12, but rather than do that I would just like to copy my formats. To do that I'm going to use something called the Format Painter, which is on the Home tab. So I'm going to click on the Format Painter. Now there's 2 options here. I can click once to click the format, and then I would only work one time. Or I can double click the Format Painter and I can redo the formats as often as I want. So in this case I want to cover every paragraph of my document. So I'm going to double click, and then all I have to do, you can see my cursor changes to this little paintbrush. I simply have to click inside the paragraph to copy those formats. Okay, and then to turn it off I just hit the escape button, or I go up and click on the word Format Painter a second time. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to change the line spacing on these bullet points. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, because you can see here that what I have is line spacing or paragraph spacing, I'm going to change these two to single. Okay. to do the same thing on here. So I'm only selecting the first, second, and the third line. I don't want the fourth because I want to keep that space after the fourth line. I'm going to change that again to single to jump it together, or to 1.15, doesn't matter. Okay, skill number 8, set line and page break options and modify styles. Okay, so we've talked about styles. So if I click up here on, let me just click on the word LED lights. So I'm going to go up here, and you can see that this word LED lights is a heading 1 cell style. But if you remember when we first created it, the word LED lights was over at the left margin. We then centered it. So we actually modified this format because the heading 1 cell style by itself makes something left justified. But when we centered it, we actually changed it for just this one. If I click on the word bibliography and I click on this here, you can see this is also a heading 1 cell style, but this one's left justified. If I go back to LED lights, heading 1 cell style, but it's centered. And again, that's because we centered it after we had applied the heading 1 cell style. One of the advantages of using a cell style is that when you modify the cell style, it will automatically apply that modification to every other instance of that cell style within the document. So in this particular case, I want to have all of my heading 1 cell styles centered as opposed to left justified. What I can do to do that is I'm simply going to right click on the heading 1 cell style. So, well, sorry, before we do that, make sure you're positioned in the LED lights text, which has the heading 1 cell style applied to it, but is centered. I'm going to right click on heading 1 and I'm going to say update heading 1 to match selection. So when I click on that, it doesn't, never mind, it did work actually. I'm going to update to match. The reason that it jumped over is because I actually moved my cursor over top of this heading 2, so it was just showing me. If I go down to bibliography now, you can see that it is now centered. Okay, so in effect what happened was we had the LED lights with the heading 1 cell style, then we centered it, and then when I right click on the style, it gives me the opportunity to say make every other one heading 1 cell style match what I currently have, and that's what we did here. Okay, we're going to go to navigation, or to methodology. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the heading here so you can see the word methodology, and I've got it here on cost-benefit analysis and what. This is not going to work the way the textbook shows it, and that's simply because what we're talking about next are widows and orphans. So even though I'm going to follow along what the textbook says, you're not going to actually be able to see it because it's just the document's not set up the same way the textbook for whatever reason. I've never been able to get this to work the way the textbook has it, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. What I want you to do is bring up the paragraph launcher. So right click, go to paragraph. And I want you to click on this second box here called line and page breaks. Now there's two things in here that we want to worry about for this particular part of the exercise. One is this thing called widow and orphan control, and the second one is this one called keep with text. So first let's talk about widow and orphan control. A widow is when you have most of a paragraph on one page and you have one line of that paragraph on the next page, just because of word wrap, it hit the end of the document and it bumped one line down to the next page. That's considered to be a widow. That one line really should stay up with the rest of the paragraph. And an orphan is basically the same. So I have one line of a paragraph on the bottom of a page, and the rest of the paragraph is moved to the second page. Now by default in Word, widow and orphan control is turned on. And what that simply means is that unless you have at least 2 lines of a paragraph on the next page, it will do one of two things. It'll either move that orphan or that widow back up to the page above, or it will move one line of the text of the paragraph from the first page down to the second, so that you have at least 2 lines of that paragraph on the second page. And orphans basically do the same thing. If I have a single line on the top of the page, it will probably more than likely simply take that one line and move it down to the next page so that all of your text will stay together. Okay. The next option here is keep with next. If I turn that on, what that will do is an example here, and again I can't show it to you, but here I've got the word methodology, and that heading belongs to the text below, right, to all this. So I've got the, whoops, let me get out of here for a second. So here I've got the word methodology, and then I have all of this text below it that applies to that heading. Now if what I wanted to have happen here is that if for whatever reason all of my text below gets jumped to the next page, I don't want to have a heading at the bottom of a page and all the text that it belongs to on the page below. So what the option keep with next is, so on paragraph, this option here, keep with next, when I turn that on, what will happen is that if for whatever reason, that's interesting, I don't know what happened here to my stuff, but don't worry about it. It screwed up my formats here, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. What will happen is that with keep with next turned on, if for whatever reason this text got bumped to the next page, it would take that heading and move it to keep it with the text that it belongs to. Okay, so keep it requires so it'll move to the next page if there are not at least 2 lines of the following text on the same page. So if I have at least 2 lines of that paragraph that follows the heading methodology on the page, it will stay on the page. Otherwise, it will move the methodology down to the next page. Okay. So again, I'm not going to worry about the formatting. I don't know what the hell happened, so let's just ignore it. I'm going to move on to skill number 9. I'm going to click on the View tab. And this is just to show you there are many ways to look at your document. Anything on the View tab determines how your screen looks. So that's how we turned on the ruler. We could turn on grid lines. We could turn on or off the navigation pane. And you have options here to zoom to a particular size. 100% one page is going to make it a one page. Multiple pages is going to show it like this. Page width is going to change so that it's completes the size. Normally we're just going to stay at 100%. That's the default that when you're working with it. You can also use the zoom slider down at the bottom of the screen to make it smaller or bigger as you will. Okay. We talked about margins already, so I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, and so that's basically skill number 9. Skill number 10 is all about headers and footers. So in PowerPoint, we looked at headers and footers, and they were very restrictive. So you had headers on the slide, you had page number, date and time, or footer could go on the slide, and page number, date and time, header, or footer could go on the notes and handouts pages, but they were restricted exactly to where they would be. So all you could do is click on footer and put in some text, click on header and put in some text. On Word, on the other hand, headers and footers are extensive. There are a huge number of pre-built headers and footers, as well as you can create your own. So let's go into the Insert Headers and Footers dialog box. Actually, before we do that, I want you to go to the top of the document. So Control Home to go to the top of the document, and I'll explain why when we get into it. So I'm going to click on Insert, and there's headers, footers, and page numbers. I'm just going to show you, if I click on headers, you can see you have all of these pre-built headers, and there's quite a few of them. And you also have the option here to edit a footer or edit a header, which just simply puts you in the header, and you can add any information that you want. Footers are the same. If I click on footers, you can see you have a number of pre-built footers, or I can click on edit footer, which will simply put me in the header, in the footer, and then I can add whatever documents that I want. Page number is basically a header or a footer that throws in page numbers. So top of page, I have plain number 1, 2, and 3, accent bars, and so on and so forth. Bottom of the page, in the margins, you can put information into your left and right margins. Current position we're not going to worry about. So I want you to click on top of page, plain number 3. And what that will do is it will open up the header, so you can see the word header here, and it puts the number 1 on the first page. And if I was to scroll down to the bottom, you can see there's my space for my footer, there's my header for page number 2, and so on. Now the important thing here is notice that the wording here on the header, it says header and footer, and then on page 2 it says header and footer. What I want you to do is put a tick box, or is to check off the text box that says different first page. You have to be in the header and footer tools Design tab. When I click on different first page, you can see that my header changed from header footer to first page header, first page footer, and then I'd start over again, header and footer for the rest of my document. And notice as well that on my title page, I no longer have the page number showing. So what you're using this for is actually when you select the box that says different first page, you're actually creating two sets of headers and footers. One set of headers and footers that are just for the first page, they're called first page header and first page footer, and then a second set of headers and footers that are for the rest of the document. And of course you're going to use this if you have a cover page. If you have a resume, on your cover page you don't want your page numbers, but you want them to show up in the rest of the document, and so on. So that's the whole purpose of the different first page. Okay. All right. So go to page 2 and then click inside the footer. Okay. Now, in the footer in Word, and this is basically the same in Excel, what you'll have is I want to put in the name of the document into my footer here, but I don't want to type it in. I want Word to automatically put in the name of the document based on the name, whatever I save the file as. To do that, I have to add something called Quick Parts. So when I'm in the footer, I'm on the Header and Footer Tools Design tab. There's a box here called Insert, and in here I've got date and time, document information, quick parts, picture, and online picture. We're not going to worry about these two. Quick parts and document information. Document information is something they just added in Office 2013. It's just basically a shortcut to some quick parts. So it gives me author, file name, file path, and document title. Quick parts gives me auto text, document property, and field. So basically, file name is just a field. So I could, instead of going and clicking field or file name here, I could click Quick Parts, field, and then I could go to find file name, and there it is there. Regardless of how you get it in there, when you're working on your grader assignment in MyIT-Lab, you cannot just type the name in. MyIT-Lab will mark that incorrect. You must use the Quick Part field to add the document file name. So I'm going to simply click OK on file name, and it will put in the ROD underscore LEDs, whatever. Okay, I'm going to hit Tab. I'm going to type in the words draft, and I'm going to hit Tab again, and I'm going to insert my date and time. So I'm going to click here, put in my date and time, and again it's the same thing. I can say update automatically or not. So if I turn that off, it will always show January 11th. If I turn that on, it will show whatever the current date is, and I click OK. Alright, okay. And basically that is it for this exercise. To get out of the headers and footers, you click on the Close the Headers and Footers option here, and if I wanted to see what it looks like when I print it, I'm going to click, and you can see that as I scroll down, there's my cover page, no headers and footers. There's page 2, it's got the 2 at the top, my footer across the bottom. There's page 3, which is or page 4, 3 and 4, and so on. Alright, that's it. We're done. Thanks very much. Bye.